listening to Chop, the original Guillotine League podcast. Everything you need to know to avoid the chopping block. Chop is brought to you by GuillotineLeagues.com. Now, your host, Paul Charchian.
Welcome to Chop. I am Paul Charchian. Joining me today, my co-hosts, as usual on Thursday, we begin with a man whose love of modeling goes so deep, his basement has a quarter-mile of HO scale model railroad track. It is Matthew Hoot Hoot Freedman. Hey, Freedman.
Charch, I'm starting to become a little bit terrified. Last week, you were super on the nose with the location of where I might or might not live. And now it's like you are describing in perfect fashion what I have going on in my basement, aside from the dungeon. Really? Aside from the dungeon, of course.
From the sex dungeon. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah. But other than that, nailed it with the trains.
All right, fantastic. I love that. And also joining us, a man who is currently suing 23andMe for clearly misdiagnosing his DNA lineage to JJ McCarthy. It is Thor, Nystrom. How could they get this wrong? Obviously, you're related to JJ McCarthy.
I had some questions. I tried to talk to the CEO. He wouldn't take my calls, but we'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I mean, clearly misdiagnosis, and they've got to get that part right.
Yeah.
A reminder, everybody who is listening to this podcast, we are also available in video format on the Fantasy Life YouTube channel, the Chop Podcast. This is an edition on Thursday called Flex Around and Find Out. Freedman, tell people what they can expect over the course of this show.
Yeah, everyone's talking about something. Everyone's doing something. We'll do nothing. No, it's homage to Seinfeld there. Everyone talks about, these are the guys that you should start. But in Guillotine, it's really important to focus on the guys you shouldn't start. And so in this episode, we talk about 9 players who are on that flex borderline, guys that you could legitimately consider for your lineup. And we're going to make the cases for why you should not start them this week.
We had a good week last week. And if I can peacock for a minute, David Montgomery was a fairly bold call last week coming out of the Ravens game when he had 156 yards and he ended up finishing with 12. I feel pretty good about that one. We're going to take a similar tact with a player this week. We'll talk about that a little bit. The bye weeks are here, guys, and the bye weeks in Guillotine take on whole different meaning than they do in a standard league. In a regular league, a week 5 bye is not that materially different than, say, a week 12 bye or a week 14 bye like we have this year. But this is very different in Guillotine. And I'd like to take this concept with a natural segue to Highlights Magazine. Obviously, this is the kids' magazine that has been in doctors' and dentists' offices for 80 years. Matt DeMarca, if please put up the Highlights Magazine so people know what we're talking about. I know you guys are familiar. You remember this?
Oh, yeah.
You guys remember Highlights Magazine? Absolutely, right? Highlights was started in 1946, and they started at 46 coming out of the war, and it was losing money, and the founder, a guy named Gary Myers, was planning to shut it down, but he had a last-ditch idea for Highlights Magazine. What if I sent it to where kids are and they're bored? So he starts sending Highlights Magazine around to doctors and dentists' office at no cost. It just shows up at these doctors and dentists' office, and it ends up sparking subscriptions from parents who see their kids doing all the activities in the magazine. There's these bored kids, they're sullenly waiting for a tetanus shot, and they'd spend time with Highlights in the waiting room. And then their parents subscribed. And it quickly turned around the Highlights Magazine company. But then, tragedy strikes. Highlights in 1960. The founder of Highlights Magazine and his wife and the company's vice president were killed in a massive midair collision outside LaGuardia that left 134 people dead. The accident was the world's deadliest aviation disaster to ever occur when it happened in 1960. And that could have been the end of Highlights Magazine. But the board of directors installed some new people, including some family members, and the company continued on. By 1971, Highlights Magazine had 1 million subscribers. And by 1995, right before the internet, Highlights had 3 million subscribers. In 2006, Highlights magazine announced its 1 billionth home delivery of magazines. Now, there's a long-running theory that Highlights magazine would repeat their content every 6 or 7 years because the audience was always new, right? You never had the same. By the time you could repeat something that was in the magazine 6 years ago because you never had the same readers over the course of 6 years, but that is only a theory so far. Now, one of the trademarks of Highlight magazine, as both you and Thor and Freedman, as you know, is Goofus and Gallant. You may recall Goofus and Gallant from your own trips to the doctor or dentist's office. Goofus is always taking the easy route with immediate reward and making bad decisions. Goofus is the bad boy of Highlights magazine, and all the elementary school girls, of course, were drawn to Goofus. Gallant, on the other hand, does the right thing, even if it means delayed gratification. In this riveting panel that you see on your screen right here, Goofus knocks down a child snowman. Now, Freedman, you're in Texas, so I'll explain that a snowman is something that kids build out of snow. They methodically roll some snow together into ever-expanding balls, and then you stack 3 of them on top of each other in sequential order into a person-shaped formation. Then you put on some coal for the eyes, and then you have the carrot nose, and then you've got the snowman. Now, Gallant in the right side panel over here helps the child by rebuilding the snowman and apparently getting the hat back that got knocked off because they're passing a hat here. Although, if you look at that snowman in the right panel, I think he's pretty bitter. I mean, sure, he's technically smiling, but doesn't he look pretty angry about just what just went down with Goofus? I mean, I think revenge is on that snowman's mind, if you ask me. So, Thor and Matt, in order to highlight the dangers of a Week 5 bye, I need one of you to be Goofus and one of you to be Gallant.
I do not care which one I am. Thor, I'm going to say, is more of a Gallant. Let's just be honest.
All right.
Between the two of us, I'm probably a little more of the Goofus. So
Goofus,
I'll
Freedman?
do Goofus. Yeah.
All right, Freedman, you're Goofus, and that means Thor, you are Gallant. That's Freedman, you've got Josh Jacobs as Goofus and his Week 5 bye. At the draft, you weren't really paying that close of attention, and you're like, hey, Josh Jacobs is good, I'll draft him, but you didn't really consider enough of that Week 5 bye. Goofus known for always taking the easy, fast approach and not really thinking ahead, and here we are, Week 5. To make up for the loss of Josh Jacobs, Goofus, in this case Freedman, throwing darts at guys like Sean Tucker or Michael Carter or Mari DiMercato this week. Meanwhile, as it turns out, Gallant is throwing out the same lineup as last week with all the normal starters. That's a big advantage. Now, the Josh Jacobs problem for you, Freedman, uniquely solvable in a Guillotine League, is you can spend your way out of the problem. You've got Josh Jacobs. You don't want to go all the way to Sean Tucker or Mari DiMercato or Michael Carter. So you could spend on whoever the big name free agent was this week, like say Derrick Henry, available in many leagues. You could just drop $275 of fab and you're back in business. You don't have to worry about this Josh Jacobs problem for this week, so you can spend your way out of it. But then there's Gallant, Thor Nystrom. A Week 14 bye for Christian McCaffrey, who he maybe chose instead of Josh Jacobs. Now, by Week 14, the distinction in a Guillotine League is you're incredibly stacked with your roster. Losing somebody like Christian McCaffrey is no big deal because then, 9 weeks from now of waiver wire bidding, you've got somebody on your bench that's almost as good as Christian McCaffrey. You've got Kenneth Walker, Chuba Hubbard, or J.K. Dobbins, or Tony Pollard, not even normally starters, but somebody that level that you can put into your starting lineup, and you don't have to pay $275 for him. Those are players that you could have picked up over the next 5 weeks at an increasingly big discount as people start running short of money. Pollard, Dobbins, Hubbard, Walker, those are guys that probably only cost you down the road $30-40, and they end up saving you, say, $250 of fab, and that could be the difference between a championship and and potentially an early chop by having all that extra money.
Yeah, you want to prioritize me as Gallant. You want to prioritize floor initially in a Guillotine league season. where you hopefully put yourself in a position to be able to take the ceiling that naturally occurs later in the season because of all the talent that's available on the wire. But the name of the game to get there, it's just not being the low team on the totem pole in any given week. So that's why we prioritize the floor early on in seasons, and then we hope we get there at the end where and hopefully we have some money to go out and compete for all those studs that are going to be on the waiver wire. But yeah, like initially, just the one sentence takeaway, it's prioritizing floor initially in a Guillotine League season.
Can I wearing my Goofus hat, aka Cowboys hat, can I kind of push back? You got to be a Goofus to be wearing this hat. Can I push back a little bit?
Of course.
But I guess maybe sort of ask like a promo question. So it seems like it would be possible that, obviously in week 14, your team is stronger, your bench is stronger if you survive to that point, but everyone else also has a stronger team too. And it seems like when you're at that point going against other powerhouse teams, that the drop from Christian McCaffrey, who has the week 14 bye, to whoever else it is that you might be putting in there, that actually might hurt you more than the drop from Josh Jacobs to Michael Carter in week 5, because you're probably still not going to have the worst team in the league that week. That would be my way. Or especially if you bid for Derrick Henry and you get him for $275, my thinking would be, all right, even though Derrick Henry hasn't been great to this point in the season, I still think of him as a top 10 NFL running back. And I am going to need to have multiple guys like that on my team to win a championship in the last week of the season. So if I can get him now, then I have him for the rest of the season, which gives me a higher week to week floor to survive future potential chops. So I don't know. Like I see your point in it, but I, as Goofus, actually might see danger in having a week 14 stud on bye.
All right. Interesting theory. And I think there's some merit to that. By week 14, there's only 5 teams left. So your chances, just your raw chance of getting knocked out is higher, right? Because now there's 14 teams left. So there is a distinction in that. But I want the $250. That $250 can go a long way. And if I really wanted to pour that $250 into a much better running back than the Tony Pollard, Kenneth Walker level I was talking about, in November, by week 14, that $250 gets me anybody I want. I mean, I can name my price at that point. I can get Bijan Robinson at that stage for the same $250. So if you wanted to spend the same amount, if you spend it then, you can get, and probably for less, get anybody that you'd like. All right, let's enter the flex around and find out stage of this, in which I will do a lot less talking, and won't that be refreshing? As we enter this stage of our discussion, let's remind people that Flex Around and Find Out is brought to you by Xfinity, introducing the 5-year price guarantee, one consistent internet price for the next 5 years, guaranteed. Freedman, you are up first. Your first Flex Around and Find Out player is the always inscrutable Seattle running back situation with Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to say I've sneaked a peek at the players in the outline for Thor, and I have to say, I think all of these guys were on my do not draft list before the season started. So I'm feeling super vindicated right now as I'm looking at that list. But Zach Charbonnet, let's talk about him. So in week 4, he returned to action after being out for week 3, and he returned also to his former role as a RB2 within that offense. Now, it was still a timeshare. He wasn't like a distant RB2 in terms of the workload that he was getting. If you look in the utilization report, you see that, it was close to even, but he was still as the number 2 running back within that offense. So it's a timeshare, which automatically makes me a little uncertain, because timeshares, I think, can really can really diminish the floor that a guy has. Now, there are some good factors for sure with the Seahawks. They're at home. They have 3 extra days of rest. They're hosting an East Coast team in the 4 p.m. Eastern window. They're favored, right? All of those are good things. But the Bucs have probably the best run defense in the league. They're number 1 in defensive rush EPA. And it's not like that's a random 4-game sample. They've been great for years against the run. And a lot of that is because they have nose tackle Vita Vea. So you have a split backfield and a bad matchup. And Charbonnet has just 2 targets on the season and is yet to have more than 50 yards in a game. If not for 2 touchdowns this year, his season would look like an absolute disaster. And we caught a glimpse of that in week 2 when he had literally just 10 yards for the game. Like 18 yards and no touchdowns, like that is a downside performance that is well within the realm of reality this week. So I want no part of Charbonnet in the setup. I think in terms of a bench player that you have who has significant upside because of the potential injury to Kenneth Walker in the future, Charbonnet is interesting. Like you would be fine having him on your team, but I do not think you want him in your starting lineup this week.
And Kenneth Walker, when healthy, is really good. Yeah. He's really, really good. He's better than Zach Charbonnet when he's healthy. And, to me, the moments from Charbonnet is when Walker's languishing with an injury. Then, at that point, that's when I start to get interested in him. That's a good call out. Thor, your first flex around and find out player is who?
Is the first guy on Freedman's do not draft list from over the summer. Denver Broncos quarterback Bo Nix against the Eagles. Bo Nix last week against the Bengals had almost 30 fantasy points. Which got him up to QB 20 in fantasy on the season in terms of points per game. But Bo Nix has gotten there in this sort of boom or bust fashion. He had the QB 5 finish last week against that Bengals team that doesn't play any defense. He had a QB 11 finish as well. But the other 2 games, QB 27 and QB 19. This week you get the Eagles, and I think another one of those dud performances is coming here. Only Baker Mayfield has topped 200 yards passing against the Eagles defense so far this season. Bo Nix, who was averaging less than 180 passing yards per game heading into last week when he got everyone's favorite get right spot against the Bengals. I think in this game he's going to have less than 175 passing yards. I wouldn't be starting him if you have any other viable options.
I think I'm with you on that. It felt good last week, but it's going to be it's a much, much trickier process this week.
Yeah.
My flex around and find out player is Minnesota running back Jordan Mason. We hit on the Cleveland situation last week with David Montgomery. Now, as it turned out, Jahmyr Gibbs ended up having a reasonably good game. But basically everybody else who's faced the Browns has struggled big time. This is a really tough spot for Jordan Mason. And I know it's hard to bench a team's workhorse runner in a Guillotine League with 14 remaining teams. But this is Mason's hardest matchup of the entire year. The Vikings will be missing 3 and maybe 4 offensive linemen. First rounder Donovan Jackson, right tackle Brian O'Neill, center Ryan Kelly, possibly out. And his backup, Michael Juergens, also very possibly out. And the Cleveland run defense is awesome. They're the only team allowing negative yards before contact. On average, they're hitting somebody before the line of scrimmage. They rank number 1 in yards per carry at just 2.7 yards per carry. That's half a yard better than the second best run defense. And far better runners have been erased by the Browns. David Montgomery, we mentioned last week, 12 total yards. The week before that, Josh Jacobs, 30 yards. Week before that, Derrick Henry, 23 yards. Freedman, what do you think about Jordan Mason? I think he needs a goal line run to be fantasy effective in this game.
Yeah, I have more to say on this game later, so I'm going to hold some of the arrows in the quiver. But I'll just say 100% agree. Really tough matchup for Jordan Mason, and echo your point. Because of his role, he really needs the goal line work, and who knows how many touchdowns end up being scored in this game. I think it's a pretty low number. So agree with you.
This is the Vikings' lowest point total, Vegas over-under point total that they've had in 20 years. That's the expectation coming in here, is that this is going to be a very low-scoring game. Very nervous about Jordan Mason. All right, Freedman, your second flex around and find out player is Philadelphia wide receiver Devontae Smith, going up against that brutally tough Denver pass defense.
Yeah, I feel like this is such low-hanging fruit that it's maybe cowardly that I even mentioned this. But yeah, like Devontae Smith, like he's an objectively good player. You know, if he were on another team, he might be the wide receiver 1 on that team. Instead, he's, next to AJ Brown, which means he's the wide receiver 2 in one of the best offenses in the league. In theory, one of the best offenses in the league, because they haven't played like it so far. And if you kind of look at the breakdown, the Eagles are number 3 in slowest pace this year. They take 29.2 seconds between snaps, right? So they're playing at a really slow rate. And also they're running at a higher rate than any other team in the league. Number 1 in the league with a 54.4% rush rate. So you put that together, and it means that they are getting very little done in the passing game. Jalen Hurts has averaged just 152.3 passing yards per game. Those are like sub Justin Fields type of numbers. Right. Like the Eagles are just not passing. Yeah. They are just not passing the ball, and they might not need to pass that much again because they're home favorites, right? They might just be able to rely on the running game the way they have been and continue to win. And then there's the bad matchup with the Broncos secondary. And then you look at what Smith has done this year. He hasn't had more than 60 yards in a game. He had just 29 yards and 2 receptions last week. There's just not the consistent opportunity in this offense for him to put up the numbers. And I think they can pass the ball. We've seen them do it before. We saw them do it in the Super Bowl. We saw them do it in week 3. They have the weapons and the ability to do it. They just don't necessarily have the incentive, and they're not doing it on a projectable and consistent basis, which means that in any given week, the downside of volatility could strike. And that's what I'm expecting this week. So Devontae Smith, super talented guy, like a strong offense, but he's not getting a lot of opportunities within that offense because they're just not passing the ball.
So Freedman, the funny part to me about all of this is that the running game's not working either. Here's Saquon Barkley averaging barely 3 yards per carry. And it's not like the running game has been so effective that there hasn't been a need to pass. It's neither is particularly working right now. And I find that part to be a little bit baffling, trying to decode the Eagles' offensive problems right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. And the wild thing about all of this is their offensive coordinator has been on the team for years, like as their pass game coordinator. And then now he's the guy calling the plays. You would think that he should be able to step into that role and have a really strong sense of the strengths and weaknesses of his players. And we just have not seen that yet. So yeah, you're right. It's not that the running game is so great that they don't need to pass the ball. They're not really doing either that effectively, but they seem to be doggedly committed to the running game in a way that doesn't really make sense.
Thor, your second flex around and find out player. This is also, I think, kind of low-hanging fruit, the way the things have worked out. Tennessee wide receiver Calvin Ridley. Talk to me about what you don't like in this matchup.
Yeah, playing against the Cardinals here, obviously been a slow start for Ridley and Cam Ward going to that low-hanging fruit thing. For Ridley's part, 10 catches, 141 yards, 0 touchdowns through 4 games. He does have over a 26% first read share, which you like. It's just Cam Ward has been super inaccurate, and obviously the offense there's been discombobulation there so far. 40% of the targets thrown to Calvin Ridley have been charted as uncatchable. So it's kind of tough, but you might make the argument to yourself because of the target share, because of that first read share, to get him back in the lineup in this game against the Cardinals. I wouldn't do it in this one. Ridley clearly not 100% healthy. In the last game, the first 3 quarters, they were sort of there was more rotation with Calvin Ridley than there usually is. He wasn't just out on the field subbing in and out. Then in the fourth quarter, he barely plays. He had like 2 isolated snaps, I believe. And then he wasn't on the injury report heading into that game. He is now sat out practice on Wednesday with knee and elbow injuries. Expected to play. I just don't think this is going to be the get right spot for Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, this whole offense looks bad. First coach fired, Brian Callahan. You guys with me?
Yeah, probably.
I don't think it's close. I think it's Callahan by a mile, except maybe you have the possibility of Mike McDaniel. Something goes really wrong with the Dolphins. But I talked about this game in my bold predictions piece this week. Let me in the Charchian spirit. Let me just sort of clear out a little bit and just kind of talk for like a minute about this game and about the Titans in particular, right? They have a league worst minus 69 point differential, right? They were competitive against the Broncos in week 1, but since then they've lost by 14, 21, and 26 points. Like, this team just absolutely sucks. And normally you can look at the betting market as kind of like a proxy for expectations, right? And everyone kind of acknowledges that there are some bad teams, but maybe those teams, even though they're bad, they still compete hard. They play well. Think of the Lions under the early days of head coach Dan Campbell. That was a team that lost a lot of games, but they always competed and they often covered, right? They exceeded expectations consistently in the betting market. That is not at all the case with the Titans under head coach Brian Callahan. Last year, they were 2-15 against the spread. Like, that is unfathomably bad. That's like a market knowing that a team is bad and yet still not appreciating just how bad it is. This year, 0-4 against the spread, right? Everyone knows this is a bad team. They are underdogs in almost every game, and still the market is consistently too high on the Titans. And so I'm looking at the projections that we have in the Fantasy Life game models. The Cardinals are consensus 7.5 point favorites. We have them projected as 10 point favorites. That's, like one of the greatest deltas that we have in the model this week. The Cardinals, 3 extra days of rest coming off of Thursday Night Football. This is their second straight home game. At State Farm Stadium, over the past 16 games, they've had a top 5 home field advantage. And in this game, they get the full benefit of their home field advantage, because home field advantage, it can calibrate kind of based on specifics of the opponent that you are facing. So home field advantage is normally cut not quite in half, but about half when you are hosting a team in your division, right? That's not applicable here. The Titans are out of your division. You also have sort of a maximized home field advantage if you're an indoor team and you're hosting an outdoor team. If you play on turf and you're hosting a team that plays on grass. And so it's like all of these edges line up in the Cardinals' favor to where they've already got a good home field advantage, and then they have it maximized because of those various edges in their favor here. And then you look at who they're playing. The Titans, a team that normally plays in the 1 p.m. window, traveling west to play in the late 4:05 p.m. Eastern window, playing their second straight road game. And then you just kind of look at some of the circumstances for this team. The Titans are in such disarray that last week, Callahan yielded offensive play calling duties, but he didn't give them to the offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz. He gave them to the quarterback's coach, Bo Hardigree, and then they scored 0 points. I mean, like this team is just an absolute disarray. And I know, like, I'm going on this rant, but it's a way of saying, like, a couple of things. One, the Cardinals better cover this week after everything I've just said. But two, I absolutely with Thor that this offense is just in total disarray, total chaos right now. And Calvin Ridley specifically, he's getting outplayed by Alec Manor, the day 3 rookie, so like, if you can be the number 1 option in a bad offense, okay, maybe. But if you're getting outplayed by a day 3 rookie and you're supposed to be like the stud veteran in your pass game, like it's close to over for you. So I am 100% with Thor on this one.
I love this segue, and you are welcome to do that anytime you want. The floor is yours, my man. That was great stuff. I love it. I love it. My second flex around and find out player, New England rookie running back Travion Henderson, as he goes up against Buffalo. Now, first, I'm going to grant you, Buffalo's not a great run defense. And last week, the Saints kept things interesting in that game with Kendre Miller posting a career best game against Buffalo. But the rest of it I don't like for Henderson. A touchdown last week saved and masked an otherwise 4th straight lackluster appearance for Travion Henderson. New England's timeshare with Ramondre Stevenson is very alive, very real. And the amazing thing is, even last week, coming out of a game in which Stevenson fumbled twice and effectively lost the game for his own team, he had double the snaps, more rushes, and double the routes run over Travion Henderson. I'm not saying Henderson isn't good or will never be good, but I am saying he hasn't looked good yet at any point this regular season, and I don't know that I want to trust my Guillotine League team to somebody who's never looked good. Let me give you some metrics around that. Among running backs with at least 25 carries, Hendo is 41st, only ahead of Rico Dowdle and Kareem Hunt in yards per carry. In broken tackle rate, Henderson is 37th. That is 5th worst, also ahead of Rico Dowdle and Kareem Hunt. In rushing yards over expectation, Travion Henderson is 3rd worst, also ahead of Rico Dowdle, but not Kareem Hunt. So we'll give Kareem Hunt credit for that. He's not catching passes at the rate that we thought. We're actually getting more routes run from Ramondre Stevenson. The usage isn't very high. The productivity isn't good. Travion Henderson, to me, is not a safe start, and I think that touchdown last week may have masked it for people who might be tempted to put them in lineups in a bye week. What do you guys think?
Yeah, 100% agree. I was out of the analysts at the company, I was sort of the Henderson naysayer in the offseason, and I don't want to crow about it because he's a talented guy, and it could be a situation where in the second half of the season he ends up taking over the backfield and he becomes a league winner. That is still a possibility, but right now right now it looks bad, and you cannot trust him at all in your lineup.
Agreed. As we move into the final stanza of Flex Around and Find Out, a reminder, today's show entirely built around performances that may not live up to your hopes, but that won't happen with Xfinity. Introducing the 5-year price guarantee from Xfinity. One internet price, 5 years guaranteed. Life is unpredictable, but the price of your internet should not be. Get a reliable price and a reliable connection from Xfinity. When they say all in, they mean all in. Get Wi-Fi equipment and unlimited data, all included. Guillotine Leagues are about constant change, roster upheaval, a continual improvement. But no matter what changes in 5 years, the price of your internet will stay the same with Xfinity. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees extra and subject to change. All right, let's get back to Flex Around and Find Out. Freedman, your final Flex Around and Find Out player. We're going back to London for this ugly Vikings-Browns game. You've got David Njoku. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, we're going back to London, and looking at the outline, we are staying in London for the rest of the show. Let me kind of give the macro perspective, because you already talked about Jordan Mason, but the macro perspective for me on this game. So Jim Schwartz and Brian Flores, they joined the Browns and the Vikings as the defensive coordinators in 2023. And over the past, 2 years and, 4 games, they have been number 1 and number 2 in defensive EPA. So these are, in my opinion, the league's 2 best defenses. And then you look at the offensive situation for both of these teams. You have a backup quarterback in Carson Wentz behind Charch, as you mentioned, a very injured offensive line. You have an undersized third-round rookie quarterback making his first NFL start in Dylan Gabriel. You have this in an overseas game played in a soccer stadium. This is all just a setup for a really low scoring game. And you see that reflected in the lines in the market. This has a slate low consensus total of 36 points. But let me tell you, that is still too high, right? The under in my projection is a 5-star bet. So that's the macro environment, but that impacts all of the guys on the micro level. I'm expecting really diminished production for everyone. And so then you look at Njoku in particular, rookie quarterback in his first start, competing with Harold Fannin Jr., and the Broncos are leaning more into the run game with Quinshon Judkins, who's really the only part of this Browns offense that is working. So you look at what Njoku has done this year, 126 yards, no touchdowns. It has been pretty close to a disaster. I just don't think we see much improvement from here on out, and that is especially the case this week in a really tough matchup with a Vikings defense that, again, has been a top 2 unit since 2023.
So, Thor, talk to us about Dylan Gabriel. He's a dink and dunk passer, and so there's part of me that feels like maybe Njoku leaks out for 5-yard catches. The Vikings are short 2 linebackers that would normally get tight end coverage duty, like Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel, and then Harrison Smith with his mysterious illness. He's only playing about a third of the snaps. He would often get tight end coverage duties, and he may not be on the field. I wonder if there isn't a scenario where Njoku gets 5 or 6 catches, 40 yards, and puts in a quasi-plausible Guillotine League day. Tell us about Dylan Gabriel a little bit, Thor, because I know you're up to speed here.
Yeah, well, I mean, Joe Flacco throws 6 interceptions, and you're looking at this game coming up here with a total in the mid-30s. You know, some of the lowest game total that you'll ever see heading into a game. You want to do exactly what the Steelers did last week to the Vikings, where Aaron Rodgers, a decent final stat line, but Aaron Rodgers only completed 2 passes that were 6+ air yards downfield. It was just the dink and dunk thing. Immediately after the snap, within 2 seconds, you're throwing the ball within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage or behind it. And you're trying to get a guy, hit him on the hands, and then try to let him run. And they, DK Metcalf ended up ripping off an explosive one last week. But I wondered if Cleveland watched that tape and they were like, "This is the time to put Gabriel in," because that's what he does. What he's good at, it's deciphering the coverage look really quick, knowing where to go with the ball, making confident decisions. He sees the field well, and he throws an accurate ball as long as you don't stretch his arms beyond its means, right? I mean, Dylan Gabriel is small. He has a below average arm. He's not a great athlete, but he sees the field real quick. And all you got to do with the antidote to Brian Flores' defense, it's getting the ball out super quickly in your passing game before the blitz can get to you. Right. I mean, you have to gauge it correctly, but when you catch him on the blitz, get the ball out immediately, and you have a shot for a guy to only need to evade 1 or 2 guys, right, and then be galloping down the field. So that's what Dylan Gabriel is going to do in this game. I think you're going to see a lot of completions within 5 yards line of scrimmage in a game that we all expect to be very low scoring. And Mr. Freedman, I agree with you. I would be betting the under even on this minuscule number that we have for this game.
All right, Thor, let's stay in London. And Matt Lamarca, nice enough to put up this, the London Has Fallen movie poster. And I've got a beef with you guys on this movie poster because this happens all the time. The person on the left is not Gerard Butler. The person in the middle is not Aaron Eckhart. And the person on the right is not Morgan Freeman. How do you put 3 heads together, right, and not have them in the order of the names that you're showing? I think that's really weird, and you see it all the time on movie posters.
It's one of the things I'm wondering with the Vikings offensive line. Where's Ryan Kelly? Where is Brian O'Neill? Where's Donovan Jackson? We got like a who's on first situation with the Vikings offensive line, and this goes into this play here, my fade here, and okay, a lot of the other fades that we've had. I'm fading TJ Hawkinson. I know Freedman will love this because I argued with Freedman over the summer when I seen that he had TJ Hawkinson on the do not draft list. I was like, I think you're making a mistake. I was making a mistake. TJ Hawkinson, it's been a really tough season, but for the Vikings offense, as a whole, but because of the cluster injuries, the biblical plague of injuries the Vikings have had on the offensive line, it has forced TJ Hawkinson to chip almost every single time he gets out into a route. I found it fascinating. I was at the game at US Bank Stadium when the Vikings played the Falcons, and there was one play where Hawkinson totally missed a chip, and McCarthy got plastered by a free rusher that wasn't touched by anyone that Hawkinson should have chipped on that play. Very next play, Hawkinson drops. He was open, intermediate. Ball hits him on the hands and it clanks off. I wonder if that was in his head. And I also wonder if he got chewed out when he went back to the sidelines and then in tape studied the rest of the ensuing week of, bro, you need to chip. This is not the season, and this is not the situation where you can shirk or eschew your chipping responsibilities. You're playing next to Justin School, the guy who gave up 4.5 sacks to Aiden Hutchinson last year and has given up a oodle of them this year as well. You must chip. And because of that, it has delayed TJ Hawkinson's ability to get into his routes, almost on a route in, route out type basis. Even before you get to the fact of how much Minnesota's passing game has struggled to this point, you're delaying that. And you're also making it categorically impossible for him to get down the field. The Vikings are giving up pressures 2.5 seconds, at most 3 seconds after the snap. How TJ Hawkinson going to get downfield after chipping first in that amount of time? So you're seeing him used more shorter. Last week, he ends up getting 4 catches for 39 yards on 5 targets against the Steelers. I think it's going to be lower in this game. they almost need to keep TJ Hawkinson home the entire game to block. You almost have to do max protect and then just hope that Jefferson or Addison can eventually get open, and that can be your passing attack in a game where obviously there's not going to be many points scored. Neither of these teams are going to take any chances with the ball, or in terms of that, you're not going to go YOLO. And then, of course, there's the thing about Jordan Addison being back, and he worked back in the last game. He wasn't quite as ingratiated. His final numbers look really good because he broke off that one short pass and had the long yak. Still don't know how he got caught from behind by the linebacker, Peyton Wilson, but we digress. But there will be more targets going to Addison going forward. You have the thing where you have to chip anyways. That's where. Oh, and then last thing, Cleveland's defense ranks in the top 10 in fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends. This is a really bad matchup for TJ Hawkinson.
Agreed. I'll put a couple of numbers against that. Hawkinson last week, as the offensive line kept suffering injuries, last week Hawkinson's pass blocking snaps doubled from what they had been in weeks 1, 2, and 3.
Have to.
And because he was chipping and then going out, and you alluded to this, and I'm just backing it up with some numbers. Last week, Hawkinson's ADOT shrunk to 4.5 yards. It just, at that point, it doesn't matter how many targets you get because you're getting 4.5 yards and you're getting tackled. It's over. Doesn't matter much. So, TJ Hawkinson, I agree with your flex around and find out. My final player, we're staying in London, same game. It's funny how this works. Jerry Jeudy. We've already talked about Dylan Gabriel. He's going to get put in a blender. Brian Flores is going to mess with his head. I don't know if you guys have heard this stat. Brian Flores, since he's come to Minnesota, he's been here, been in Minnesota now 3 years and a few games. No first or second year starting quarterback has ever beaten Brian Flores. What he does pre-snap is basically a UN humanity aid situation. And because he's got this underwhelming arm strength, the Vikings can bunch up the short and middle parts of the field, daring Gabriel to send his gentle tosses outside or deep parts of the field. Those are going to be dangerous plays. Cedric Tillman's on IR, so you might be like, hey, that's going to mean more for Jerry Jeudy. I don't know that it really even matters and it's probably worse because that's going to free up Isaiah Rodgers, Pro Football Focus's #1 ranked cornerback, to basically follow Jerry Jeudy around as much as they want him to. And that is a terrible matchup for Jeudy. And also, Judy's having a horrible season. He has the league's lowest passer rating on balls thrown to him. Freedman, Thor, do you want to guess the passer rating on balls thrown at Jerry Jeudy?
I'll say 22.
22?
I would say like 31.
31.
No, it's got to be worse than that because of the interceptions. The interceptions when thrown to him.
All right, you want to revise your answer?
Can I go negative? I mean,
now,
whatever the lowest number is, I want that number.
As you probably have heard before, if you just dirt the ball every time, the passer rating is 39. Passes to Jerry Jeudy have a passer rating of 26.
Oh, close.
Yep. So you were close. You guys were both. Yeah. You were in the general direction. He's also become the league's preeminent ball dropper. 4 drops already for Jerry Jeudy in this game. He drops more balls than a hernia specialist. It's a serious problem for Jerry Jeudy, and the Vikings rank #1 in PPR fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They allow the fewest yards to wide receivers. They're third best. Touchdowns allowed to wide receivers, third best. Jerry Jeudy, dead to us for this week.
Yeah, and I'm down with avoiding Isaiah Rodgers. It's probably the only thing that Cleveland staff has told Dylan Gabriel outside of you get the ball out immediately when you see that there's more than 5 guys coming. Find your hot read. But outside of that, the whole prerogative of this game for the offenses on both sides is do not turn the ball over. We'll take punting over, right? Like, I mean, that is the path to either one of these teams. Just giving this game away is giving short field to the other side, so they get free points. Dylan Gabriel, you need to avoid Isaiah Rodgers. And, of course, they're going to stick Rodgers on Jerry Jeudy, but Isaiah Rodgers has been the human turnover machine so far. Right. So you got to keep the ball away from him.
All right, there you go. 9 players. Flex around and find out. Take your chances at your own risk. These are all guys that we don't think are suitable for starting. And every week as we do this, the bar keeps going up. We have to give you better and better players because the number of teams in your Guillotine League are shrinking. Your rosters are getting better. So I'm looking forward to December when we're talking about dropping some truly great players or not starting. We're going to be like, Xavier Worthy, dead to us this week. Guys you would automatically put in your roster right now.
Going to be some great slander.
It will be great slander, won't it? And it's the kind of stuff that you only get in the Guillotine League format. Freedman, Thor, thank you very much. This has been a ton of fun and I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you guys today. And for everybody else out there, and thank you to Matt LaMarca for all of your technical guidance on this show. We very much appreciate your help as well. And thank you to our viewers and listeners. We encourage you to subscribe to the Chop Podcast. And also, we'll be back on Tuesday for more waiver wire advice. Talk to you then, everybody. Bye-bye.